I had planned to do this video this week, given two bulletproof reasons why our club owners are not going to at some point relocate St James's Park. But in light of the revelation yesterday in the news about Amanda Staveley, this video now is 3 bulletproof reasons why the club owners are not going to relocate. And that's not by me just trying to shout my opinion louder than somebody else's. I researched this topic thoroughly and add some evidence and facts to this situation. So if you have any lingering notions that we are going to relocate St James's Park at some point in the future, you really need to watch this video. It's coming up. Welcome back, it's Eddie here from Tyneside Life. Before I get into those 3 bulletproof reasons, I need to establish some context and a framework of understanding for this video. First of all, back in May last year, I released a video convinced Newcastle were going to rebuild a new stadium at Benton Park, where the tax inland revenue is, and because they're being relocated to the Pilgrims Quarter owned by the Reuben brothers. I was horribly wrong, because 3 days later it was announced that by Murdad and Amanda that the club weren't going to build a new stadium. So I immediately released an apology video, and since then I have made sure, even if fans didn't like the reality or didn't like to hear what I had to say, I made sure that I'm as factual as much as possible. Another underpinning principle I need to stress in this video is that since our new owners have bought Newcastle United, they have from the very beginning really wanted to stress the importance of the relationship with the fans, that we're central to the decisions that they're going to make, and that trust is absolutely crucial for that positive relationship and the rebuilding of our club. Trust. So that means they're not going to say things which are misleading in any way. They're not going to make promises that they can't keep. So you can be rest assured that when they actually commit to saying something, they actually mean it. So not only am I hoping that you're going to find this particular video really interesting and insightful, I would watch it in conjunction with reading an article I wrote on the 10th of March about this particular subject on my website, which I've called Why Our Owners Will Not Relocate St James's Park. And I say that because I can't go into every bit of detail in this video, it would just be too long. So I've put that in the blog article that I've wrote. I've really drilled into it, added a lot more meat to the bones, added the context and the nuances, so that there shouldn't be any doubt as to what I'm saying in this particular video. Not least because I talk about the PIF's relationship with Newcastle United and why they were motivated to invest in a Premier League club, because it's really important, certainly from the feedback and comments that I get quite regularly. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what this whole arrangement is all about. Of course it's positive, of course this is an exciting time for Newcastle, of course they're going to want us to be the best we possibly can, but there are some significant misunderstandings as to what the PIF will and probably won't do for the club in the future. What I'd also encourage you to do, if you haven't already done it, is watch a video I released 2 weeks ago about a proposed expansion of the Gallagher End, which is obviously crucial to one of the points in this particular video, but I'm going to get to that a little bit later. Leading up to this point as well, just a few weeks ago, I reached out to a guy called Stephen Hodgson. He described himself as a chartered construction professional, and he's wrote 4 or 5 articles for True Faith. If you haven't already read them, I'd encourage you to read them. They're excellent. But I only stumbled across them very recently, and I was heartened by the fact that he's an expert in his field. I'm not. I was encouraged because my opinions that I've developed over the months on stadium expansion quite closely match what Stephen was talking about. I did, however, disagree with him on his point of why he thought it would be more cost effective to build or relocate St James's Park with a purpose-built super stadium, because at first glance, I mean, I don't disagree with that from a business perspective. So I reached out to him, we exchanged a few emails. It seemed to me that he'd missed some really important factors in the wider lens of why it's unlikely that a new stadium is going to be built. And he did acknowledge to me that he did take his views in isolation and hadn't considered the points I'd raised with him. So that's the stage I'm at now. So let's get into these 3 reasons. And number 1, I Our owners have told us they're not going to move away from St James's Park. Going back to when they were trying to buy the club and eventually did in October. Before that, they had an interest in Liverpool, however fleeting it was, but it was going to cost a fortune to even consider buying Liverpool. So they turned to Newcastle because of our vociferous fan base and the potential the club has, because we're a sleeping giant and there'll just be an explosion of interest. So they bought Newcastle United. So at the point they've bought Newcastle United, they're fully aware of the potential of the club being a sleeping giant and the awakening of the fan base that we have. So it was no surprise that the current situation we find ourselves in and the clamour for season tickets now, this hasn't caught them off guard. This was all part of the plan. So when back in May, when Mairdad and Amanda were interviewed, they were asked about the potential of moving away from St James's Park, and Mairdad said, no, we won't be moving away from St James's Park. It would be like ripping the heart and soul out of the city. What they didn't say was, well, no, we'd prefer not to move away from St James's Park because we understand it's really important to the fans in the area. But, you know, things change. We'll have to see, you know, if we have some success with the club, we might have to consider that in the future. They didn't say that. They were unequivocal with a no, and they said no for a reason. And for the reasons, or what I stressed at the beginning about trust, you have to take their word for that, because if somewhere down the line they suddenly said, oh, you know what, we've changed our mind, we're going to build a new stadium, I'd have an issue with that. And actually tens of thousands of fans would have an issue with that. And it would break that trust that they hold so dear. Number two, the club have spent tens of millions of pounds purchasing the lease on Strawberry Place to expand the Gallagher End. There is no other reason, and a fan zone on match days isn't a reason. So they did that at the beginning of February. Fast forward a few weeks, Amanda Staveley finds herself at the MIPIM real estate conference in Cannes in France, which occurs every year, where developers in the world, they meet together, they network, create contacts and discuss innovative ideas. And that's what she was there for. And during that conference, she mentioned in her keynote speech that since the purchase of Strawberry Place, they're now in the market to look for an architect to come up with some ideas for clearly the expansion of the Gallagher End. But she goes on to talk about redeveloping the stadium generally. Clearly that's in a superficial sense in terms of food and beverage. She talks about the ticketing systems. So it's absolutely clear. They're not going to spend an absolute fortune, according to Stephen Hodgson in one of his articles. It could be several hundred million to expand the Gallagher End. They're not going to do that with one eye in a few years' time to try and relocate St James's Park somewhere else. So if you got this far in the video and you still think that our new owners will go back on their word, if you think that they're going to compromise the history of the city and the club and the location of St James's Park, if you still think they're going to fork out a staggering amount of money to expand the Gallagher End, only with one eye relocating at some point in the future, you should know point three, it's not up to the club. That's right, it's not up to the club as to whether we move from St James's Park. Clubs used to have that power. You look at Man City, West Ham, Everton, but all that changed in the very recent government-led review, which was published just last year, which come into effect this season, which put, amongst other things, the fans at the heart of decision-making of their clubs. If you want to know a little bit more about that, I did a video about heritage assets, which is really important because some people seem to think that they were going to change the club name, the colour of the home shirt and the Newcastle badge. That's clearly not the case. It was misunderstood and taken out of context. So watch that video because I talk about a lot more about this review. So as part of the recommendations which are coming into effect for the FA is an independent regulatory body which is going to oversee the FA to make sure that the FA are doing their job and that clubs aren't going off on a tangent and doing their own things. So for example, if a club wanted to change the badge or the home colours or the name, they have to get the approval of the majority of fans. And that's why they're talking about it, the fan advisory board at the beginning of next season, as part of a wider meeting, just to establish the importance of our heritage assets, not to try and change those things. So let's say, for example, Newcastle wanted to relocate St James's Park. They have to do a business plan, obviously, a feasibility study with the fans, do a poll to get the views of the majority of the fans, and then get permission from the independent regulatory authority before they can even consider moving stadium locations. I'm negligibly certain that the majority of fans don't want to move from St James's Park. Even if you wanted to disregard point 1 and 2, point 3, the club can't decide it on their own. Thankfully, we have owners that care passionately about the club and passionately about the fan base and are determined to develop that relationship of trust. They're not going to go back on their word. They're going to do exactly what it says on the tin. If it looks like an elephant, sounds like an elephant, it's an elephant. So they're going to develop St James's Park to a capacity, like they said, to 60 to 65,000. Yes, it's going to look a bit out of shape and a bit higgledy-piggledy. So what? That's what makes St James's Park so unique and so special, especially with its location and its access to all the bars and the clubs and the restaurants and the cafes. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. So rest assured, all you fans who are getting bombarded with information that we're probably going to move, we're not. So that's it. I hope you found the video invaluable and informative. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to leave your comments below. If you want to know more about my thoughts and opinions and from a historical perspective on the outside of St James's Park, I do a guided tour. You can check the details out on my website as well. But also don't forget to read the articles I've wrote on my website because they do go into a lot more detail, and I give a few more reasons actually why this place will never be relocated.